You're checking your investment account. It's a Saturday morning. Coffee still warm. You've been saving and investing for 3 years now. The balance shows $18,400. And there's this moment where you do the math in your head. At this rate, putting away $500 a month, markets doing their thing, you'll hit $100,000 in, 15 years? Maybe 12 if you're lucky? And there's this sinking feeling. 12 years. That's so far away. You'll be in your early 40s. That's half a lifetime from now. And you think about Charlie Munger's quote, the one that always comes up. The first $100,000 is a bitch. Everyone says it. Everyone repeats it. But sitting here looking at $18,400, you don't really understand why. Why $100,000? Why not $50,000 or $200,000? What's special about that number? And here's the thing nobody explains clearly. It's not about the $100,000 itself. It's about what that number represents mathematically, about the point at which your money starts doing significant work without you, about the threshold where compound growth stops being theoretical and starts being visceral. You're at $18,400. The math says you've got a long way to go, but the math also says something else, something that changes everything once you understand it. My name's Peter, and if you've ever looked at your savings and wondered why building wealth feels impossibly slow at the beginning, and wanted to understand the actual mechanism that changes once you hit certain thresholds, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the first $100,000 isn't special because of motivation or psychology. It's special because of math. Cold, hard, beautiful math.
So let's start with what $18,400 actually does for you right now versus what $100,000 would do. You're making $62,000 a year. After taxes, you're bringing home about $3,850 a month. You've been diligent. You're saving $500 a month, sometimes $600. You've been doing this for 3 years. That's how you got to $18,400. At a 7% annual return, pretty standard for a diversified portfolio over time, your $18,400 generates about $1,288 a year. That's $107 a month. Decent, but not life-changing. That $107 doesn't cover your car payment, doesn't cover groceries, doesn't cover much of anything significant. Now let's look at $100,000 at that same 7% return. That's $7,000 a year, $583 a month. That's a car payment. That's most of your groceries. That's a meaningful chunk of your fixed expenses covered by money you're not actively earning. But here's where it gets interesting. It's not just that $100,000 generates more income. It's that $100,000 fundamentally changes the trajectory of how you build wealth from that point forward. Here's the math that nobody talks about clearly. When you're saving $500 a month and earning 7% annually, getting from zero to your first $10,000 takes about 18 months. You're grinding. You're putting in $500 every month. The returns are minimal because you're working with small numbers. A 7% return on $3,000 is $210 a year. Nice, but it doesn't move the needle much. Getting from $10,000 to $20,000 takes about 16 months, a little faster, because now you've got $10,000 generating $700 a year while you're still putting in that $500 a month. From $20,000 to $30,000, about 15 months. The money you already have is starting to do more work. Not a lot, but more. This pattern continues. Each additional $10,000 takes slightly less time than the one before it because the balance is generating increasingly significant returns. But the effect is subtle. It doesn't feel dramatically different. $18,400 to $28,400 doesn't feel that different psychologically from $8,400 to $18,400. But watch what happens past $100,000. From $100,000 to $110,000 with the same $500 monthly contribution and 7% return takes about 11 months. From $110,000 to $120,000, about 10 months. By the time you're going from $180,000 to $190,000, you're adding $10,000 about every 8 months. Same contribution, same effort, same $500 a month, but the timeline accelerates dramatically. And here's the part that's actually wild. Once you hit $200,000, you're adding $10,000 every 7 months. At $300,000 every 6 months. At $500,000, you're adding $10,000 every 4 months. The amount that took you 18 months of grinding to accumulate initially is now happening automatically in 4 months. That's the math. That's why the first $100,000 changes everything. It's not motivation. It's not a psychological milestone. It's that you've crossed the threshold where compound growth starts doing heavy lifting, when your money works almost as hard as you do. Most people think building wealth is linear. Say $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year. In 16 years, you'll have $100,000. Keep going and eventually you'll be comfortable. That's not how it works. Compound growth is exponential, not linear. But exponential growth has this weird property where it feels painfully slow at the beginning. The curve is basically flat. You're working your ass off, putting in $500 every month, watching the balance creep up slowly. $18,000, $19,000, $20,000. It feels like nothing is happening. Then, at a certain point, the curve starts bending upward. Not dramatically at first, but noticeably. Your $100,000 grows to $110,000 faster than your $20,000 grew to $30,000, even though you're doing the exact same thing. And that bending, that's where people break through psychologically. Because for the first time, they can see the mechanism working. It's not theoretical anymore. It's not someday compound growth will matter. It's my money just made $7,000 this year while I made $62,000 at my job. My money is doing 11% of what my labor does. That changes how you think. Not in a motivational way, in a mechanical way. You start seeing your portfolio not as a savings account, but as a machine that generates income. And once you see it that way, your behavior shifts.
But here's the mechanism that makes the first $100,000 particularly brutal. It's not just that growth is slow. It's that your mistakes cost you more in the beginning. When you're at $18,400 and you withdraw $2,000 for some emergency or impulse purchase, you're not just taking out $2,000. You're taking out $2,000 plus all the growth that $2,000 would have generated over the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's 7% annual growth. That $2,000 becomes $3,934 in 10 years, $7,739 in 20 years, $15,223 in 30 years. You didn't just spend $2,000. You spend $15,223 in future money. And when you're at $18,400, that $2,000 withdrawal is 11% of your entire portfolio. You've set yourself back months, maybe a year in progress. But when you're at $100,000 and you need to withdraw $2,000, that's 2% of your portfolio. The impact is still real, but it's not devastating. Your trajectory barely changes. So the first $100,000 is brutal, not just because growth is slow, but because any setback is proportionally massive. You're one unexpected expense away from losing months of progress. And that fragility creates psychological stress that makes the journey harder. There's a psychological thing that happens around $50,000 that's worth understanding. It's right in the middle of the climb to $100,000, and it's where a lot of people stall out. You've been grinding for years. You're at $50,000, and you do the math. You're halfway to $100,000 in dollar terms, but you're not halfway in time terms. It took you maybe 6 or 7 years to get to $50,000. And it feels like it's going to take another 6 or 7 years to get to $100,000. Except it won't, because of the compounding we just talked about. But you can't see that yet. The acceleration hasn't kicked in enough to be visceral, so it still feels linear. And that makes the second $50,000 feel just as daunting as the first $50,000. This is the danger zone. This is where people get discouraged and either stop contributing or worse, cash out because it's not growing fast enough. But here's what's actually happening at $50,000. Your portfolio is generating about $3,500 a year at 7% returns. That's $291 a month. You're still putting in $500. So your total monthly gain is $791 on average. You're adding $9,500 a year to your net worth between your contributions and growth. At $75,000, you're generating $5,250 a year, $437 a month. Add your $500 contribution, and you're adding $11,250 a year. At $90,000, you're generating $6,300 a year, $525 a month. With your $500 contribution, you're adding $12,300 a year. The rate of accumulation is accelerating, but it's happening gradually enough that you don't feel it day to day. You only see it when you look back at the numbers over a year. So at $50,000, you're not halfway done in time. You're about 2/3 done. The next $50,000 is going to come significantly faster than the first $50,000. You just can't feel it yet. And that's the trap. The acceleration is real, but invisible until it's dramatic enough to be visceral. And most people don't have the patience to wait for invisible acceleration to become visible acceleration. You're lying in bed. It's a Thursday night. You're thinking about your portfolio again. $18,400. You're thinking about how far away $100,000 feels. You're doing the math on how old you'll be when you hit it. And there's that tightness in your chest. Because 12 years feels impossible. 12 years feels like a lifetime. And you're thinking, what if I just stopped contributing? What if I use that $500 a month for something that improves my life right now instead of waiting 12 years? That thought is normal. It's rational, even. $500 a month is real money. That's going out more, upgrading your life, feeling less tight month to month. But here's the math on what happens if you stop at $18,400. If you stop contributing, but leave the $18,400 invested, it's 7% annual returns. It grows to about $36,000 in 10 years, $71,000 in 20 years, $140,000 in 30 years. Not bad, but you never hit that acceleration point. You never get to watch your money do meaningful work in your lifetime. But if you keep contributing $500 a month, here's what happens. 10 years, about $95,000. 15 years, about $165,000. 20 years, about $262,000. 30 years, about $566,000. Same $500 a month. The only difference is that you kept going through the slow part. The person who stopped at $18,400 has $140,000 in 30 years. The person who kept going has $566,000. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between supplementing retirement and actually retiring comfortably.
So here's how people who actually build wealth past $100,000 think about the journey differently. And this is key. They don't think about it as a journey to $100,000. They think about it as building a machine. When they're at $18,400, they're not thinking, I need to get to $100,000. They're thinking, I'm building a machine that will eventually generate meaningful income. Right now, the machine is small, but every $500 I put in makes the machine bigger, and eventually the machine will be big enough to matter. That reframe changes everything, because you're not waiting 12 years to hit an arbitrary number. You're building something that's getting more powerful every single month, even though you can't feel it yet. And when they have a bad month, when they're tempted to skip a contribution or withdraw money, they ask, does this decision make the machine bigger or smaller? If it makes it smaller, they don't do it, not because they're disciplined, but because they've seen the math on what it costs long term. They also stop comparing their $18,400 to someone else's $80,000 or $200,000, because wealth building isn't a race against other people. It's a function of time and consistency. The person with $200,000 either started earlier, contributed more, or got lucky with timing. It doesn't matter. Your $18,400 is yours, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, growing. Here's what actually changes when you hit $100,000. And this is the part that makes all the grinding worth it. Your portfolio generates $7,000 a year, every year, without you working for it. That's $583 a month. And for the first time, you can actually see your money working in ways that matter to your life. Your car breaks down, $900 repair. That used to wipe out almost 2 months of contributions. Now, your portfolio generates that much in about 6 weeks. Not ideal, but manageable. The repair doesn't derail your progress the way it would have at $18,400. You want to take a vacation, $1,500. Your portfolio generates that in about 10 weeks. You can do it without feeling like you're destroying your financial future. That $100,000 has become a buffer, not just against emergencies, but against the psychological weight of scarcity. You're not rich, but you're not fragile anymore. And here's the bigger thing. Your behavior at work changes. You're still saving $500 a month, but now you've got $100,000 behind you when your boss makes an unreasonable demand, when you're thinking about asking for a raise, when you're considering a career move. You're doing all of that with the knowledge that you could quit tomorrow and survive for 2 to 3 years on that $100,000 if you had to. You're not going to do that, but knowing you could changes your posture. You walk into negotiations differently. You say no to things differently. People notice. And weirdly, that confidence often leads to better outcomes, better raises, better opportunities. The $100,000 isn't just growing on its own. It's creating second-order effects in your career and your life that generate even more value. Now let me be very honest about something. Getting to $100,000 is hard. It's slow. It's boring. And most people don't make it because they either get discouraged and stop contributing, or they hit an emergency and have to withdraw a chunk, or they just never start in the first place. But the difficulty isn't because you're doing something wrong. It's because wealth building is genuinely slow at the start. The math is brutal. You're pushing a boulder uphill and it barely moves for years. And everything in culture tells you to do the opposite. To spend money to look successful. To upgrade your life with every raise.
to enjoy today and let tomorrow figure itself out. So staying disciplined through the slow part requires going against every cultural message you're receiving. That's hard, not because you're weak, but because you're human. But here's what nobody tells you. The people who make it to $100,000 aren't more disciplined than you. They just saw the math clearly enough that they couldn't unsee it. They understood that $500 a month at age 25 becomes $566,000 at age 55. And once you really see that, once you feel it viscerally, it's hard to make decisions that sabotage it. So here's the thing about the first $100,000. It's not magic. It's not a psychological milestone. It's a mathematical threshold. It's the point where compound growth shifts from theoretical to visceral, where your money starts doing significant work, where setbacks stop being devastating, where the acceleration becomes visible. Most people think wealth building is about earning more, but wealth building is about crossing thresholds. And the first real threshold, the one that changes the game, is $100,000. After that, the math gets easier. The second 100,000 comes faster. The third, even faster. But you can't get there without grinding through the first one. And the first one is brutal specifically because you don't feel the acceleration yet. You've got $18,400. That's not nothing. That's a machine you're building. It's small right now, but it's real. And every $500 you add makes it more powerful. You're not 12 years away from $100,000. You're 12 years away from crossing the threshold where wealth building stops feeling impossible and starts feeling inevitable. That's the math. That's why the first $100,000 changes everything.